Several say they saw cigar in sky. Officials can't explain UFO. From the Moose Jaw Times, August 18th, 1969. There is no apparent explanation for an unidentified flying object seen by several Moose Jaw adults and a number of children Sunday evening. Brent Gibson, 13, of 1186 Duffield Crescent, said today the object was seen in the northwest Sunday night at about 8:20. It appeared like a flat silver disc, and it was going slowly to the northwest, the grade 9 student said. You could see it change into a shiny ball as it got further away. The ball was also silver except for some orange coloring, he said. He ran into the house for a camera, and when he returned, the object was gone. But there were 2 streaks of black smoke in the west forming a triangle. Children from the neighborhood were watching the object, and Brent and Mr. and Mrs. J.H. Karza of 1183 Duffield Crescent were watching the object from their car on another street. The Karza family was not available for interview. Mrs. Richard Gibson, the boy's mother, said she saw the object and described it as cigar-shaped. She said Brent went out for a walk with his brother and came running in and said there was a flying saucer. She didn't believe him until his sister went out and said she saw it too. She described the object as sort of cigar-shaped, and it was up there for quite a while. It moved slowly and zigzagged, and it wouldn't go too far at once. A short while later, a jet came from the east and headed west towards the spot where the object had been. The object, which turned into a ball with orange coloring, disappeared by the time she could convince her husband to come out. By that time, 2 tails of smoke had appeared in the sky, one moving from the southwest to the northeast and almost forming a triangle with one from the northwest and moving straight down, she said. The object had been moving too slowly and stopping and moving to be an airplane, she said. Department of Transport Air Traffic Control Supervisor at Regina said the radar log showed no reports of UFOs or strange activity at the time Sunday night. The weatherman at Canadian Forces Base said there was some meteorite activity Sunday night, but not until much later than the sighting. He did not know of anything else. Base Information Officer Major D.V. Tinson said there were no CFB aircraft flying that night at that time of the sighting, nor were any sightings recorded at the base. Unidentified flying objects reported in Tisdale area. From the Saskatoon Star Phoenix, May 27, 1969. Mr. and Mrs. Ed Young of the Allenville district southeast of here have reported sighting unusual aerial objects near their farm home recently. The objects, 2 large red balls, appeared over their home about midnight, according to Mr. Young. Twice earlier in the evening, Mrs. Young said she heard roaring sounds. About midnight, the sound was heard again. The following day, Bill Piowich, a neighbor, found 2 packets of tinsel-like material on land he had cultivated a week before. Nearby were 2 plastic-like containers into which the packets of tinsel fit neatly. Traces of the metal substance were found in at least 6 other locations on a half section of land. 2 other farmers reported finding the substance in a line approximating the path of one of the objects cited by the Youngs. Major J.L. Beach at the RCAF radar station at Dana said there were no military aircraft in the area at the time in question. Major Beach said the metal substance could be chaff, a material dropped by military aircraft to confuse radar observers. He said an exercise involving about 100 aircraft had been staged May 7th through 8th, and it is possible some of these aircraft could have passed over the area in question. Sighting shiny hoverers. UFOs have made stir in Saskatchewan. From the Leader Post, September 26, 1974. Recent indications of visits by unidentified flying objects on farms near Langenburg and Young have caused some people in and around this town 35 miles west of Swift Current to recall the great UFO commotion in these parts back in 1967. Like the case of a certain local clergyman who was having a quiet cup of tea in his suburban kitchen one evening when he glanced out the window and was aghast to see what looked like 3 flying saucers hovering over a clump of hollyhocks in his garden. The holy clerk in question was absolutely certain they were bright metal airborne vehicles, about 15 to 20 feet in diameter. As he was a man of known rectitude in the Gull Lake community, and certainly not one given to hallucinations, the minister's report was unsettling. And later, when the hollyhocks were found to have been swirled in an anti-clockwise pattern by the shiny hoverers, or whatever, even by the most cynical Gull Lakers, that there must be UFOs around. The clergyman was rather embarrassed by it all, what with the local notoriety and such, and seldom mentioned his dramatic sighting thereafter, especially to outsiders. Investigators from the Department of National Defense, which then operated a UFO section, contacted him, but the story is that he rather demurred. Over the way on a side hill along a municipal road south of town, a farmer spotted a strange circle of burnt grass in a pasture around that time. It was about 30 feet in diameter, and local speculation was that something very hot had touched down briefly there. Then there's the story of the strange lights. Dr. Robert Jacobs, a surgeon once in practice in Swift Current and now of St. Catharines, Ontario, was driving back from Cabri along Highway 32 one clear, starry night when he was blinded by an intense blue-white light hovering right over his car. I swerved over into the ditch, he said, and slammed on the brakes. It was very frightening. The strange light hovered over Jacobs' car for about 15 minutes, while Dr. Jacobs, by his own account, crouched on the floor under the dashboard. Then it was all over. Dr. Jacob raised his head to the side window just in time to see the brilliant object racing at incredible speed to the west over the fields. It was over the horizon in seconds, he said. The scene shifts about the same time of year to Shaunavon in the far southwest, where a school bus driver working for school unit number 7 is proceeding along Highway 13 one crisp morning with a load of kids and one mother, the latter riding along for an interview with the principal of the Shaunavon school. Suddenly, a bright light appears directly over the school bus. The engine seems to go dead, and the bus rolls to a stop on the road. The children are frightened. The bus driver and the mother tell them to keep their heads down, and the whole entourage cowers under the mysterious light. Trying to get the bus moving again, to get the kids out of the influence of whatever it is outside, the driver turns the key in the ignition switch, but nothing happens. After 10 minutes, the light veers off and disappears to the south. The driver, shaken, tries again with the key. The bus starts and proceeds smoothly into Shaunavon, where the driver, the mother, and many of the kids regale the townsfolk with the story of their adventure. About this time, Swift Current also was alive with stories about UFO sightings. There were a couple of hoax attempts, like the lady who suspended an oil-filled blowhole cover, which looks very much like the conventional impression of a flying saucer, from a clothesline and photographed it. The D&D mobile team dutifully garnered the picture and sent it to Ottawa for an analysis, along with all the other data gathered on the Great Southwest UFO Scare. In addition to the Canadian military investigators, the United States Air Force sent a couple of official probers up to the Gulf Lake Shaunavon Swift Current area from Colorado Springs to interview local residents about UFO sightings. After the flurry in 1967, there weren't any more firm reports of UFO activity around these parts. Interest seems to have shifted to Weyburn and Esterhazy around the turn of the decade, where there were more frequent reports of strange lights in the sky. And now Langenburg and Young. In the 1960s, scientists tended to take a jaundiced view of UFOs, and that included military scientific types too. The U.S. Air Force closed its famous Blue Book, and a few years ago, D&D at Ottawa packed up its UFO investigation section. Attitudes may be changing, however, and it is now clear that the case for unidentified flying objects hasn't been put to rest. According to Ted Phillips, an investigator for the Northwestern University Center for UFO Studies, who was in Saskatchewan this week checking into the Langenburg and Young field circles, and the Langenburg sighting report, scientific interest is perking up. In fact, the NBC television network in the United States will feature an hour-long special on UFOs December 15th, and there's a good chance that one of the Canadian networks will be picking it up. Meanwhile, we should remember that a UFO is just what the initialized acronym suggests: an unidentified flying object. Let's forget about Martians and little green men from Venus or wherever, and keep trying to find an explanation for what so far has been a reoccurring mystery. Flying saucer seen, from the Leader Post, September 10th, 1974. If flying saucers are your cup of tea, Edwin Fuhr has a 6th-place setting for you. At least he did have, and still does, sort of. It all started about 10:30 a.m. a week ago Sunday, when the 36-year-old farmer was swathing a rapeseed field about 6 miles north of Langenburg. The rape was lying real flat, so I was moving slow to pick it up, not watching where I was going. But I knew I was getting near the slough and would have to turn up on another row, so I looked up. At first I thought it was one of those tin duck blinds like you see in that Outdoor Sportsman magazine. I thought maybe my brother-in-law had set it up as a joke. I got off the swather and was going over to give it a kick to scare whoever it was. But Edwin never got closer than 15 feet away from his duck blind. All of a sudden, I noticed the grass was moving, turning near this thing. I just watched it for about 2 minutes and then noticed that the whole thing was turning. I backed up slow. I wasn't going to turn my back on the thing. When I got back up on the swather, I noticed there was another 4 to the left of me, all revolving. I just froze on the seat and didn't move. For the next 15 minutes, Edwin sat motionless watching the 5 stainless steel objects hovering about a foot off the ground. He wanted to take off on the swather, but he couldn't make his hand move to the gear lever. He wanted to run, but his legs wouldn't move. I was terrified. I froze. Couldn't do anything, he said. Then they took off, straight up. There was a gray vapor coming from underneath them and a strong downwind. I had to hang onto my hat, and it knocked the rape down. It took 2 minutes for the objects to disappear into the clouds, and another 2 minutes for Edwin to again descend from the swather. I wanted to be sure they were gone. Cautiously, he walked over to the outer rim of the slough. Beneath the spot where he had seen the first hovering object, there was a depression in the foot-high grass about 11 feet in diameter. The grass on the outside was flattened and twisted in a clockwise ring. In the center, it stood erect. Then he found 4 more circular depressions where the other objects had been spinning. I felt the grass to see if it was warm. There was nothing you could feel, and there wasn't any smell. Edwin figured he has done enough swathing for the morning and headed back to the farmhouse for lunch. I didn't know how to tell my folks. The wife just stared at me and said I was nuts. Mother wouldn't believe it at all, but had figured I had seen something. Word started getting around, the way it does in rural communities where almost everybody is related. And on Monday, Constable Ron Morier from the Langenburg RCMP detachment showed up at the Fuhr home. They took me out to where they'd seen these things in the slough grass. I saw these rings, about 10 to 12 feet in diameter, said Constable Morier. Something was there, and I doubt it was a hoax. There's no indication anything had been wheeled in or out, and Mr. Fuhr seemed genuinely scared. The RCMP gathered all the information they could, including photographs and measurements, and sent the material to the Upper Atmosphere Research Section, Astrophysics Branch, National Research Council in Ottawa. And yet there has been no word from the council. Some farmers are afraid to work the fields, Constable Morier said. At least that's what I hear on Coffee Row. Could the objects return? According to Mr. Fuhr, they did, or at least one of them did. A neighbor's dog started barking Sunday about midnight and kept up until 1 a.m. The people who owned the dog said they couldn't stop him from barking and that he kept looking over here, Mr. Fuhr said. No one saw anything that night, but Monday morning when Mr. Fuhr returned to the site, there was a sixth ring exactly the same as the others. He figures that since word started getting around about the landing, 2,000 people have trampled through, over and around the center depressions. But they are still there and very visible. It was Friday before Mom would even go have a look, Mr. Fears said. They all believe it now, and Mom figures it's about time to move into town. Four city residents report UFO sighting. From the Star Phoenix, November 17, 1975. Four Saskatoon men have reported seeing a glowing, oval-shaped, unidentified flying object over Saskatoon Friday evening. 3 gas station attendants and a customer watched the UFO from Glenwood Esso on 8th Street East until it disappeared into the southeast night sky. One of the first to sight the object was customer David Schaefer, owner of Macy's Ladywear. Mr. Schaefer was having his car filled with gas when one of the attendants said there was a UFO soaring across the sky. It looked like a circular metal object, very well illuminated, flying in a southeasterly direction. There wasn't a sound out of it. It was unreal. Mr. Schaefer said today in an interview he was not sure of how high it was, but estimated 500 to 600 feet. It looked much larger than a football held at arm's length, he said, and it was traveling as fast as a jet across the sky. A person has got to see it to believe it. It gives you a weird feeling when you see something like that. The 4 watched the object until it disappeared, and Mr. Schaefer said the yellow light from the craft seemed to come from both the inside and outside of the hull. It was the first time he has seen a UFO, but he said he has believed other UFO sighting reports. For 18-year-old John Anderson, a part-time attendant at the station, it was also his first time he had seen a UFO. Mr. Anderson, a grade 12 student at Walter Murray Collegiate, said the object did not pulsate while it was in view for up to 3 minutes. He said it appeared the craft was about 1,500 feet up and had a white dome on top of a yellow football-shaped bottom. It moved slowly from the direction of Mount Blackstrap until it was directly east, and then it picked up speed and disappeared. 2 of the other attendants saw it as well, he said. Both witnesses said it definitely was not an airplane. Air traffic controller Elwood Larson said today there was no report of the Friday night sighting, but a caller did report a sighting Saturday night about 9 p.m. Mr. Larson said an Air Canada pilot approaching Saskatoon checked the report and said it was the planet Venus. However, last Wednesday, residents south of the city reported 2 bright UFOs moving up and down in the southeast portion of the sky, he said. Woman beamed aboard UFO shuts off TV shows about aliens. From the Star Phoenix, October 10th, 1992. When you've been beamed aboard a spacecraft with your family, you really don't want to watch similar events on television. So Margaret, a former Saskatoon resident now living in the Regina area, turns off the set. I shut it off on television. I don't like to recall it, she said in an interview with the Star Phoenix. She and her husband Paul have seen UFOs. She also has been beamed aboard a spacecraft. He has a long, straight scar on his leg from a cut which appears to have healed without stitches. Their most recent encounter was a couple of years ago with a UFO which followed them from about Chamberlain to Saskatoon. It wasn't their first unusual experience, and it wouldn't be their last. But it wasn't until one of the couple's relatives was shaken up with an encounter of his own with a UFO that they brought the entire issue to the attention of those interested in extraterrestrials. I paced the floor before you called, wondering if I should soften it, the story, or tell it the way it is. I don't expect people to believe me, but I know what happened, said Margaret. Margaret was hesitant to talk about some events. She has tried to blank them out of her mind. She's worried people will think she's crazy. But she says she is a bit more comfortable now talking about matters such as small alien beings as increasing numbers of reports on them come forward. I know I had time lapses when I was younger. I didn't know what they were, but now I know. Under hypnosis, I knew what they were. As a youngster, she saw a light in a field. I know now that I landed in a craft. There was a light beam. Then I was in the craft. When I was in there, I could see my whole family inside. I know they, the aliens, were doing something to them. I could see my dad, mom, and sister. They, the aliens, wanted me to go over and see what they were doing. They were operating. I went into a trauma, said Margaret. She said there were no scars left on her body. I think I'm comfortable that nothing has happened to us, she added. She said the visitors just appeared to be doing research. That's the impression Lori Vasos, a city physician with an interest in UFOs, gave me. I feel it's true. But there were scars on her husband, she said. There was one on the back of his leg and one on the base of his penis. He too had encountered time lapses as a youngster, she said. Paul remembers, for example, as a boy, about 10, playing on the farm in his treehouse just before dusk. He was just getting ready to go into the house when he saw a bright light. Then he remembers falling to the ground, but in slow motion. He had a vague recollection of falling on a barbed wire fence and cutting his leg, but his clothes weren't torn. When he hit the ground, it was pitch black. He couldn't understand why. There appeared to have been a time lapse. He found a 4-inch scar on the back of his leg, which healed without a bandage. Barbed wire would rip the pant leg. Paul was placed under hypnosis. He remembers a craft landing in the field. Some beings come out of the craft. They float him down from the treehouse and into the spacecraft. They seem to paralyze him, do some sort of medical exam, and take blood samples. They do something to the back of his leg. 20 years later, a physician examined the scar. It wasn't a barbed wire scar. It was a straight cut. It wasn't jagged, says Dr. Lori Vasos. But the couple didn't take the concerns to the attention of others until Margaret's brother Stephen was contacted by Vasos. The city physician heard about him from a mutual acquaintance. Stephen farms in the Regina area. He came home one night a few years ago to find a huge mothership there. It had 3 lights on it, he told Vasos. Each light was the size of a football field. It left no reflection in the snow. Stephen drove off to a neighbor's place. The lights followed him. He flicked the truck's lights. The craft flicked its lights back. Stephen brought out a neighbor who became frightened. The next day, the neighbor told him he didn't see any of it. He denied it. Vasos says that Stephen, too, tells of being abducted. It happens to family groups, says Vasos in an interview. Mary from northern Saskatchewan was placed under hypnosis. Earlier, without hypnosis, she could recall only a light at the foot of her bed one night and a voice saying not to be afraid. Now she elaborates. After seeing the light, she remembers floating out of bed and the trailer into some kind of craft. She sensed she was going into an other place or building. She felt the beings directing her, floating her, and then doing some medical experimentation on her. Their stories are similar to many other accounts in Canada and the United States. Had me in a trance. The farmer who saw and the Mountie who believed. Saskatchewan's famous UFO sighting. From the Regina Leader Post, September 30th, 2017. Kneeling on his living room floor, Edwin Fear reaches beneath a TV cabinet decorated with angel statues and family photos to insert a VHS tape into his video cassette player. It shows Fear smoking a cigarette as he looks over a collection of photos scattered on a kitchen table. They're intriguing images of strange circular patterns on a field, remnants of Fear's sighting of what he believes were UFOs. Interviews with Fear are all over the internet, but not this one, circa 1988. A province away at his Winnipeg home, retired Mountie Ron Morier also has a keepsake from the time when he and Fear and a small Saskatchewan town became an international sensation. UFO Incident, Langenburg, Saskatchewan, September 1st, 1974, reads the cover of Morier's black binder. Lifting that cover feels like opening a secret document that should be stamped classified in bold red letters. It contains a police report, newspaper clippings, faded photographs, and letters from scientists with the Canadian government. Morier jokingly calls it his X-File, a fitting nod to the sci-fi TV show that often focused on aliens, UFOs, and the paranormal. It's a treasure trove any UFO aficionado would covet. A business card in the binder bears the name Dr. J. Allen Hynek, hinting at just how seriously the incident was taken. One of the UFO field's most famous researchers, Hynek worked as a scientific consultant for a U.S. government initiative called Project Blue Book, investigating UFO phenomena. Hynek weighed in on the Langenburg event in the media, even reportedly sending a representative to study the site about 230 kilometers northeast of Regina. First told before the World Wide Web or even VHS tapes, Führer's story today endures in corners of the internet dedicated to UFOs and extraterrestrial life. A video interview with him on YouTube 5 years ago had a resurgence in popularity after taking off on the website Reddit. It's had more than 20,000 views. And yet, some of the story's most interesting parts remain strictly analog, existing only in the possession of two men forever linked to the strange event. There are no concrete answers for what happened on Führer's farm 43 years ago, just a tantalizing story told by a Saskatchewan farmer and the RCMP officer who believed him. Seeing a UFO up close is an incredibly rare experience. Most people just see lights in the sky, but Führer got closer. Around 10:30 a.m. on September 1st, 1974, the then 36-year-old was swathing his fields when he saw 5 saucer-shaped objects on the edge of a slough. Thinking they were duck blinds and that someone was playing a joke on him, Führer got off his swather for a closer look, but still kept at least 15 feet back. He says the saucers were hovering a foot off the ground and rotating at a high rate of speed. Their surface looked like highly polished steel. Führer stopped, backed up, and got on his swather. He sat there for the next 15 minutes, watching them hover, too scared to move. They had me in a trance, says Führer, now 79. I didn't even know what to do, because I sat there and I thought, well, gee whiz. According to Führer, the objects then took off, emitting a gray vapor from underneath, and disappeared into the sky. They made no sound. The objects flew away so fast that they were gone like that, says Führer, clapping his hands. He waited a few more minutes to make sure they were gone, then walked to the edge of the slough where he saw 5 ring patterns in the field. The grass in the center of each circle was standing, while the grass surrounding that was flattened in a clockwise circle. With no idea what he had just seen, Führer headed home for lunch. His wife Karen and his parents could tell something was wrong. When he came in, he just sat there, remembers Karen. All of a sudden, we asked him, is there something wrong? And well, then he started telling us. The Langenburg incident came at the tail end of a golden age for UFO sightings, when reports of seeing physical craft had tapered off. Even more tantalizing, the Langenburg UFOs, if that's what they were, had left behind a physical trace, the circles. This classifies the sighting as a close encounter of the second kind. Later that night, Ron Morier, then a 27-year-old RCMP constable, got a phone call at the Langenburg detachment. Führer's brother-in-law, Karl Zorn, asked if the police had fielded any UFO reports. Zorn had heard of Führer's experience in a phone call. Although both the cop and the in-law were skeptical, they both thought there was little reason to think Führer would make up such a tale. He's the last guy in the world that would. I mean, he was a teetotaler. He's a churchgoer, a very quiet, shy man, says Morier. He decided to check it out. Being an RCMP officer in small-town Saskatchewan in the 1970s, he had time. Morier and his colleagues provided what he wistfully refers to as gold-plated policing. No job was too small. Back in those days, anytime anybody approached us about anything, we responded, says Morier. The next day, he checked out the markings in Führer's field. What caused them? Morier still doesn't know to this day. 5 circles fit with the same 5 objects Führer saw. Morier's report says the flattened portion of the circles was approximately 18 inches. The total diameter of 2 of the circles was 12 feet, while the other 3 were 10.5 feet. There was no physical evidence in the area that would indicate someone had driven in and made the circles. Whatever made those impressions in his sloth there came from the sky and left the same way, says Morier. Fear was the only person at the farm who saw the UFOs. Despite how fantastic the story was, Morier could not come up with a reason why this quiet farmer would make it up. He is a responsible person, and his information is considered reliable, wrote Morier in his report. He doesn't think Fear was seeking fame or even wanted his brother-in-law to tell the police about it. Why would he want thousands of people coming to his little place there and trampling all over his yard and his fields and all of that, asks Morier. Once the story got picked up by the media, thousands of people flocked to Fear's farm. He says cars were lined up bumper to bumper along the road from his farm to Langenburg. It couldn't have come at a worse time. It was harvest time, and people were literally getting in the way of the family's work. Tourists, UFO enthusiasts, and onlookers from all over were trying to get to the site and to Fuhrer. They were chasing us down in the middle of the field, he recalls, saying some drove right in front of his combine. My brother was getting upset, and Dad was getting upset, says Fuhrer. I said, what the heck am I supposed to do? He says a plane carrying Australians who wanted to see the site even landed on a field adjacent to his farm. Hoping to deter onlookers, Fear's father finally set fire to the grass surrounding the slough where the circles were. It didn't help, though, as markings were still visible on the ground. Fear thinks they may have been made by legs stretching out from the UFOs. The phone at the family's house was also tied up with people from all over the world calling Fuhrer. He says one call came from the first man on the moon, Neil Armstrong. The 2-hour conversation, Fuhrer says, involved Armstrong telling Fuhrer that astronauts saw UFOs when traveling through space, but were told not to divulge that to the public. He said, "It's real, all right." Asked about the possibility of people making crank calls, Fuhrer says the conversation convinced him it was indeed Armstrong. Fuhrer never began turning people away or refusing to pick up the phone. He shrugs and says he accepted that people were interested. I couldn't do nothing about it. You know how people are, he says. Once the public finds out there's something out there, they'll all come out and see. Fuhrer and his wife now live a quiet life in a bungalow in Langenburg. He retired from farming in 1989 and runs a landscaping and snow-blowing business. To keep his mind occupied, Fuhrer does carpentry in his spare time, and he also enjoys reading books about UFOs. Some of those books even mention Fuhrer's story, one of North America's most famous UFO encounters. It was even featured on a History Channel documentary about UFOs. A cheesy dramatization of the sighting was made, with an actor playing Fuhrer sitting on what looked more like a backhoe than a swather. The setting for the video is a poor backdrop of Saskatchewan, with hills and trees in the background rather than fields. When the actor playing Morier arrives on scene, he's wearing the stereotypical red serge dress uniform of the RCMP, definitely not what he wore for daily duties. Fuhrer still gets the odd phone call from people curious about his encounter. He's taken no pains to make himself hard to find, and is happy to oblige anyone who calls and wants to hear the story he's told countless times. To me, it don't matter. I'll talk to anybody. If they want the story, I'll tell them the story. He's friendly, funny, welcoming, and still in surprisingly good spirits about the attention. The land where the sighting happened still gets its share of visitors. It's now farmed by Fuhrer's nephew, who tells those searching for the famous site that he has no idea what they're talking about. He doesn't want nothing to do with it, says Fuhrer. The most he ever got for sharing his story was a complimentary breakfast from CTV when visiting the studio for an interview, and that's all right with him. Asked about ever making money from his story, he tilts his head, ponders the prospect, and then shrugs it off. To me, it don't matter. It's out. The story's out long already. Fuhrer doesn't give much thought to his status as a UFO celebrity. If I had to think about all that, I think I'd go bananas, says Fuhrer. He's so humble about the experience, he doesn't even like to take credit for it. It was not my doing. It's somebody from outer space that's doing it, not me, says Fuhrer. I'm a spectator just as well as all the rest are. After the Langenburg incident, Morier took his share of ribbing from his colleagues, who sometimes called him Mulder after the X-Files investigator. But it never negatively affected his career in the RCMP, which was extensive. Morier became a composite artist and also trained to reconstruct the facial features of unidentified deceased people using sculpting techniques. During the rise of the computer, he worked on the RCMP's initiative to begin doing composite sketches digitally. After retiring from the RCMP with 27 years of service, he traveled all over the U.S. while working as a consultant on the TV show America's Most Wanted. His last job was teaching at the Northwest Law Enforcement Academy in Winnipeg for 14 years. Morier occasionally grants interview requests from the media or UFO researchers, but he knows they will inevitably lead to more phone calls. "I don't know why I do it, because I know it's going to come back and bite me in the ass again," he says. Years ago, Morier was contacted by an engineer from Japan who wanted to learn more about the sighting. While the subject is a hotbed for conspiracy theories, every person who reached out to him seemed legitimate. "I didn't talk to any kooks, I don't think." Morier has never tried to hide from the event. If anything, he's preserved it with his binder. "I'm a bit of a collector that way. I've got lots of old reports and stuff," says Morier. One of the most precious items in the binder is a handwritten letter from the National Research Council to Fear, dated October 4th, 1974, just over a month after Fear's sighting. The letter explains how scientists have been unable to find any evidence that aliens landed in Fear's farm and ask for more samples. The RNC says it no longer possesses any research on the Langenburg incident. Only one brief record acknowledging Fear's sighting exists at the Library Archives of Canada. Morier has no ill feelings about the Langenburg incident or its persistence to keep popping up in his life. He still has fond memories of policing the small community. "To be honest with you, it was the best time of my life," says Morier. Fear is convinced what he saw that day was extraterrestrial. Over the years, he has taken an interest in the subject of UFOs and is well read on the subject. He refers to government cover-ups, Roswell, and popular theories that aliens may be concerned about global conflicts on Earth. No scientific investigation has ever found evidence that alien craft landed at Fear's farm. There were no other witness reports. The truth comes down to Fear. Whether his recent YouTube interview or footage from the old VHS interview in 1988, most of the details are remarkably similar. The fact he has kept it so consistent over the years is one of the things that makes it so compelling for Winnipeg-based science writer Chris Rutkowski. You'd think after all these years he might want to embellish the story, but he tends to tell the same story over and over again. The story as of late hasn't developed into glowing green goo and aliens with almond-shaped eyes and that type of thing, says Rutkowski, who publishes an annual survey on UFO reports in Canada. It's a very straight story, so it's compelling to think that this probably really did happen as he describes it. But is it proof enough? I guess the assumption is, if it's not ours, whose is it? But on the other hand, we just don't have the proof to make that quantum jump to say this definitely was proof of alien visitation in Langenburg, says Rutkowski. The story was compelling enough to be taken seriously by the federal government. Grass and soil samples were sent to the Upper Atmosphere Research Branch of the National Research Council, but no conclusions could ever be drawn. The scientists were intrigued by a black substance found as a precipitate, especially in a sample that was taken from one of the rings that appeared to be burned. The sample was sent to Simon Fraser University for X-ray fluorescence analysis, but no conclusions could be drawn. Fear doesn't really care who believes or doesn't. People have been telling him since the 1970s that it was all in his head. "I had a guy from Quebec come out and he figures I was smoking pot," says Fear. But to this day, Morier still believes Fear is being honest about what he saw. Why would he just out of the blue make this up, says the former officer. The media ran with Morier's findings and in some cases used them as confirmation that flying saucers had landed. A headline from a newspaper in Newfoundland read, "RCMP officer convinced UFOs were real." While Morier believes Fear to be truthful, he doesn't believe in UFOs or little green men. The uncertainty of the Langenburg incident frustrated Morier because, as intriguing as it was, it didn't yield any answers. It bugged me a little that it didn't confirm or not confirm that they do exist, he says. I still don't know. Morier notices Fuhrer seems more outspoken in his interviews now than the quiet farmer he knew. He commends him for sticking to his story. Good on him. He'll never know, and we'll never know, I guess, says Morier. But boy, that would have been quite an experience that day to see what he saw. Hey all my fellow weirdos. Thanks for watching this episode. I hope you liked it. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to keep up with everything I post. If you want to watch more videos like this one, you can click on the top right corner pop-up for a full playlist. You can also send me your very own alien or UFO sightings, paranormal stories, and any other creepy stories in the comments, or post on my subreddit r/ihaveaspookystory. Or you can send them to my story submission email, pinkpossiblystories@gmail.com. Maybe your story will be in a future video. Until next time, good night, sleep tight, and don't let the shadows bite.